Okay, let's make this party happen. So last year when we were on the AI panel, which some of you might have turned up, you obviously hit the good question yesterday. Me and Jason are sat there and he's like, Jonathan, who's Jonathan.ai? I was like, oh yeah, he's my digital version of myself. And so he sat there registering Java.ai. So there's now my AI and his AI have this kind of conversation backwards and forwards. But, I think part of the story behind this was, and Tariq usually talks about this as well, about this kind of, well, what is your digital persona, right? What's you without AI versus what you could be by using and leveraging these AI tools. So yesterday was massively controversial because Jason was like, don't do prompt engineering. After giving a 2-day tutorial on prompt engineering, he was like, these AIs are going to get so good in the future that actually it's more about how you're able to have that conversation and those digital interactions. So this is a really bit of a change. Obviously, Apple Intelligence, for those who are unfortunate enough to have the 18.1 beta 4, which is on now, a lot of the Omni capabilities, which is their voice capabilities that have kind of come through, is all about having that, giving you superpowers, giving you the ability to pretty much do anything you need to do on any device. And I was just saying to these guys, this has got an NPU on it, but this is also the Qualcomm Snapdragon Elite X, which has got an NPU running on the actual system. So this can run, even though I don't know if it goes, anyway, should never do ad hoc stuff, it's always going to end badly. So this runs a 40 trillion operations per second, which you'll see in a second actually doesn't do anything, it's just sat there. So this is the Snapdragon NPU, which takes, it says it's got 8 gig of ultra-fast unified memory, but the idea is to actually allow you to run that here. And so I actually did, on the plane over here, I created this next clip, just using a local version of some of the AI GAN tools, right? And it's only about 4 seconds long, but actually, and I'm flipping forward slightly on this one, it's okay, but that was processed on there. It took about 15 minutes, right? But all I said is, create a picture of a video of a tester in a boat, because we were going to go on a boat on Friday, and this is what I got. Now obviously it's only 3 or 4 seconds, and we talked about this yesterday around how GANs have come on. Now of course you can see the eyes, it's quite easy to pick up that there's kind of mistakes in that, but the idea that this can all run locally whilst you're on a plane is quite interesting. The same thing goes for these photos on the previous one. So I have a little bit of a joke. So I was an extra in a Marvel movie, and part of it, you can see on me on the side, I'm slightly younger and what looks worse for wear version of myself. Let's see if it's play. So this is the actual clip in the, hopefully the clip, maybe I'll go forwards and backwards. I love a bit of PowerPoint. Death by PowerPoint. So this is the clip where I'm going to be in. I'm either in position 1 or 2. But obviously, we've all seen, and you were talking about them, Mid-Journey the other day, right? You can bring down something like Mid-Journey. I use something called Focus, if you ever want to pull it down from the Git repository. It's Focus with 2 O's in it, or 3 O's, one of the two. And you can obviously process these kind of GAN level images just by passing in or passing your face or something else into the actual shot. And so we've had GANs for a long time, and people like Tariq have always covered off that kind of technology. But then you add video to that, and that technology, and using things like these edge, what they call edge Gen AI, but really it's just edge AI capabilities. So I'm actually in the shot now, if anyone can guess which side it is. There you go, that was me for 2 days, filming between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. For $200. That was my best paid gig I've ever done, actually. I nearly gave up doing automation for that, but I thought, maybe not. So I was mentioning to this gentleman here, I found out this morning, but I had a podcast called theqalead.com. And it's now been renamed to the CTO podcast, which, thanks for sending me the email this morning. But I kind of joke, Joe Colantonio jokes about that. I'm the automation cyborg sent back from the future to save the world from bad software, right? And next week I'm at Automation Star with Dorothy Graham. And when I started my career back in the 90s, the software test automation book was kind of my Bible. And so I reached out to Dot, and she lives just probably like an hour away from me at the moment. And she started mentoring me. And so we're both doing opening keynote. She's doing it on the first day, I'm doing it on the second day. She's doing 50 years in automation. So she was the first person to ever write any automation code back in 1972 for Bell Labs. So she was writing automation back then. And I'm like, 25 years doesn't feel like a long time. I've got half a century to kind of catch up on Dot. But I'm trying. So I'm hopefully going to be sent back into the future. And so I was just mentioning, I think I was mentioning to Anna yesterday, it's like, I did this TED talk about 7 years ago, and you know, I don't know what's on the shot for this shot. Oh no, this is the garage. But I predicted, there was the Oxford University just predicted where AI would take the jobs, right? And obviously everyone's kind of partially scared of that back in those days. And so I was like, on the left-hand side, it was artists, it was doctors, it was musicians, it was all the things which we now have. So if anyone watched the second keynote yesterday after Jason, you know, you can go to sumo, sumo.ai, generate a track for free of music, just put in, I want it, a Disney song with whatever, and it'll just generate it. And it is brilliant, right? And that's unfortunately some of the dance videos that I've been hoping that weren't going to go viral, but did for all the wrong reasons, right? Anyway, so technology like that exists, and we've just seen some of the image quality of some of the GAN technology, which has also been used in a big way. But we had this, Anne asked this question yesterday, and I know I've still not answered it, which is going to get me later as well to do it. It's like, you know, back in 1950, so just a few miles away from where I live at the moment, is a place called Bletchley Park. Now, most people have heard of Bletchley Park, right? Alan Turing. So these are his original works of the singularity and his artificial intelligence papers back in 1950. And I was kind of partially saying machine learning's been on kind of a linear trajectory, because then we kind of went in yesterday and said, well, actually, it feels like suddenly AI has just exploded, right? You go outside, everything's AI. And yes, it has overtaken human capabilities for language and everything else. And we had a really interesting conversation, I think it was because you speak German, that we started feeding in. We had a Japanese customer that wanted us to use a Japanese large language model variant, and we found that was actually, but the output was so much better than in English. And you know, I used to joke back with a guy called Tom Gilb, who I'd massively recommend checking out. I'm sure you've checked Tom's work out. And he, back in the early 1980s, he created something called Planguage, which was an unambiguous language. And part of it was, English is great for poetry, it's not very great for defining stuff, but also the internet is full of this language. So why, if these large language models have been trained on that information, why is it better at generating out more structured languages? And it is interesting, because you can ask it any time. I'm going to ask the question in German, and I like the response in Japanese, and it will do it very well. So yes, it's definitely extended, it's gone past its abilities. And you know, Jason was talking about Google in the Google Translate days, and I was, during lockdown, I was working with MIT doing the COVID tracking. So I originally came in when it was doing the GPS stuff, and I know we did a little bit with the NHS in the UK as well. And started off with GPS, which was fine. And you know, if you've gone to Google Takeout, which I would highly recommend if you want a laugh, and you request all of your GPX data since you've ever used a phone, even if you're not a big Android user, is that every day they poll your location. So you get about 1,600 or 2,600 data points of where you've been. So anyway, we pulled all that hysterical information in there, and we started creating these models to be able to understand how people would interact in a city and how we could set off the COVID alarms if they got too close. So anyway, we started rolling it out, and we realized certain countries were using it, certain countries weren't using it. And it was because at the time we were using localized, which was human translators. And some of the translation was, we are watching you. And people were like, I'm not going any further than that, right? So part of it is language is really important. Semantics and language is very important when it comes to generative and how you interact. The other thing which I've kind of partially, I have to say, otherwise they won't pay for my flight home. So, no one knows who Keysight is, like nobody. Not even the guys that work at Keysight, which is quite annoying. But Keysight is Dave and Bill in the garage back in 1939, right? And they were building test equipment. That's what they built in that garage. It was spectral analyzers to be able to look at hardware. They sold the first one, the 200D, to Disney. What happened? They used it for Fantasia to split the audio to stereo, 2 channels. They used the equipment that Dave and Bill sold them. And so, they, nearly 100 years later, they're still making that same test equipment, right? And now the largest test company on the planet. And we're doing 7G at the moment, we're doing quantum, which is my talk for all next year, just in case anyone doesn't want to turn up to it, because I did it quite recently with one of my quantum guys for the British Computer Society, and everyone was like, don't think we want to talk about quantum tunneling yet. It's not quite a testing conversation. But it is still quite interesting, some of the stuff that's coming down the line. So, part of that kind of evolution, and this is me in Disneyland, which I thought I'd reuse last year. When was it last year? I think it was last year. With the HoloLens on, right? So, those days are gone. 2 years ago, Max Trush, someone turned up, I turned up. But the interesting thing, I was on the stage and I was putting all these animals on the stage and stuff and showing the live stream on my glasses. And at the time, we were testing this for a guy called Ruben. Ruben was created the iPhone with Jobs and Wozniak. And so Ruben, last year, the guy's nuts, right? Last time I saw him, he said, it was deadly serious to me at the time, he said, we're the last people to die. And I was like, okay. It was an early in the morning, right? I don't think he'd had coffee yet. And he was like, yeah, I've just been with my guys and we can literally, we'll be able to upload ourselves, which everyone's seen upload, so it's not like it's not a fictional thing. But he said, we're literally going to have a choice of whether or not Jonathan.ai continues or doesn't. And I was like, it's a bit too deep for me in the morning, but we'll go back to what we were going to do, which was these were used for the military, right? So they're literally using them. So we test things like fighter things, the NASA, what was the shuttle which we did the testing for? What was it?
No, it was the lander, the dashboard.
Yeah. So we do these things where it's like you're in essence testing LiDAR with the camera, and we came up with a really great metric, which was time to vomit, because they gave this all to these, to the army, and they were deployed out in the real world. They're all using them for like 10 minutes and then just vomiting everywhere repeatedly, because, there's this kind of, the time to first motion was like less than 2 milliseconds. For anything more than that, overlaying an image of, I can see someone stood behind a door, which seems a bit cheating if I'm being completely honest. If that's slightly out of delay, then obviously that person's still there while you're over here. So, good, interesting technology, and obviously 2024, we've kind of gone past all of this, and I think Jason said Web 5 yesterday to me, which was upsetting me. It feels like there's an incremental dial that just keeps on going on, and so part of it is, yes, the technology's changing, and yes, there's this crazy number, but I actually genuinely believe this number, which is very rare that I say that, is that actually 35% of our tasks can be removed. What I used to refer to as the digital drive, right? So when I first spoke here in 2012, there was a quote that said, there's 2,012 years every day spent reading email. And that was just a metric that I don't know, Forbes or somebody had just kicked out. And I was thinking to myself, how much time do we spend still using email, right? When we know, and for all those people who have got Copilot Plus, is it can respond to your emails, it can do all that stuff. James Whittaker stood on the stage 7 years ago in LA and said, I'm going to let it read my email and then change all my flights because this conference has been delayed by 2 days. And he did it live with the Microsoft stack when he was still at Microsoft. So I believe this number, and I'm going to kind of slightly upset everyone for a second by saying maybe everything that I'm talking about today is slightly out of date, because there's 2 things that have kind of just happened. So Jason's a friend of Sam from OpenAI, And he's been buying every automation engineer we can get his hands on because they're building something called a large action model. Now, Gen AI is fine for generating some kind of output, but it's not actionable, right? You want it to be able to go, yeah, go and find me a flight. But you don't need to tell it to go to Expedia or to, American Airlines. It can figure that stuff out, right? We don't need to define all those steps. You just need to say what the goal is, and it will go off and do it. So he's creating this large action model, which Microsoft have embedded into their Copilot Plus. And what their Microsoft version is called something called visualization of thought, which in essence runs, and they've quoted based on the papers recently, have already got full support for about 17% of the world's apps. Now, that 17% feels very much like it's just the Microsoft stack, right? But, they've already got within Power Automate now some AI recorders, and they've just brought Copilot Studio out, which is in essence, is an automation process mining tool which kind of looks at the jobs you're doing on a day-to-day basis and says, shall I just replace them with an agent? And me and Jason had this conversation yesterday about the fact that we hate agents, the idea of the AI agents, but unfortunately they are coming. They're not coming for your jobs because you don't have to worry about that, but they're definitely on that trajectory, right? The other thing what's really interesting about this, and I'll probably talk a little bit about it, is this. So I was part of the ISO 29119, Part 11 committee for artificial intelligence software testing. And that's why I did the book with Rex Black, and there'll be a QR code at the end we can download it. But the reason we did that is because we were all on the European Union AI Act board. So we were all going in through this new legislation, and they've got the exact same thing that's come into place for the exec order in the US as well. Now, the US exec order says if you're a US company, you're building AI-infused technology into your platform, and it's a critical platform, safety critical or medical or whatever it is, you're liable, not just for these giant fines, which sound scary, but they will just stop you trading. And so we got the partial cease thing at Keysight because we're building tools with AI, and we have to now audit those to say that we're using them ethically, trustworthy. We're not just going off and just building AI for the sake of AI. And so the legislation that's coming in is pretty scary. But it's at that hype cycle. So I was in Ghana a couple of weeks ago, and you'll see, because the next photo that I'm going to put on, which I'd recommend taking a photo of, had someone's head stuck in the absolute middle of it. So I managed to do my best at using PaintShop Pro or whatever the editing tool is. But we've got this on the website as well. So if you go to eggplantsoftware.com, you can download this report as well, completely free, which is interesting because it usually costs us a bit. And it goes through every single one of these and tells you AI engineering, what does that mean? And it's about 70 pages long. But at the top, you can see the biggest thing, AI-augmented testing, right? And I'm going to kind of spoil the spoiler alert, but next year, they're going to go so big at this. They're going to be looking at all of the kind of things that can help you. I call them AI productivity tools, but they're like, what are the kind of capabilities that you want in your day-to-day job that can actually help you be more productive? So we did this with IDC, and it's quite hard because obviously the low-hanging fruit, back about 2 years ago, I think it was, we launched our first Gen AI solution. And this gentleman on the end, it was 7 years ago when you did Eggplant AI. So we've had TensorFlow and bug hunting and all this kind of stuff in our product for a very long time. And then we thought, like everybody else did, what we'll do is we'll just go after code generation, like Codex T5 or Copilot for GitHub. And I was sat with the IDC analyst, Melissa, and obviously they're saying that actually they're seeing a roughly 400% decrease in code quality since people are using these kind of tools. And you think to yourself, but didn't they just copy and paste before from the Git repositories? And they're like, no, there's less people with less rigor. So actually we're finding more generated code that's not being fully kind of overseen by a human falling through the gaps. But we saw this, and part of the back of it was we went to code generation and we started creating, because our language is a 20-year-old language called SenseTalk, which is an English language. It uses computer vision, so it doesn't require. So we thought we'd won, because it's natural language, we can generate it, and it would test, but nobody was interested, right? People literally went, okay, that's a nice trick. Okay, yeah, fine. So we changed our entire thought process, and this is where it was like a tick list. And I know this is really blurry, but unfortunately someone's head was here. I was like, okay, slightly kind of worried. So over here, Edge Gen AI is what we just said. It's the NPU here, which if you want Copilot Plus on your laptop, it has to be able to do the 42 trillion operations per second. And that's how they rate it. So all these new devices Intel are releasing have all got the NPUs built onto the actual chip. And then you can do all that processing. Instead of going to the cloud, you can just do it on your laptop while you're flying, which seems really fun. The next thing is this, which is why I said information was really useful, is domain-specific models. Something I really didn't want to do, but we kind of got down the rabbit hole a little bit too far, and I've actually had to edit my slides this morning, is, without kind of going too much into the context camp for a second, the idea is large language models are just a dictionary. You don't want to ask it, what is our processing time for our system? Because it doesn't know your system, right? It has no idea, and it will make stuff up. Whereas if you give it all of the domain-specific information, which is the old, what we used to call RAG, retrieval augmented generation, then it uses domain-specific context. Now we've created 3 RAGs. One knowledge graph, so here's, further up should say graph RAG. So we've created 3 knowledge graphs, one for testing. So again, you can ask it, do pairwise testing. So our tool's been doing model-based testing. My previous company was a model-based testing company. But if you ask it to do pairwise testing, it won't do pairwise testing for you, because it doesn't quite know the structure or the prompts or the chain of prompts that it has to do to give you the right output. So part of it is we also have to feed in what is testing. So what are the terms, boundary value analysis, whatever else it is, that it needs to be able to understand and interpret. Embedded models, interesting. So the Google guys, for the new the new Pixel devices, they can run the entire medical doctor large language model on the new Pixel phones. So the Fitbit app has a medical doctor large language model built into it. So if I fell down a tunnel, which can potentially happen, then it would be able to, in essence, advise me and outperform a medical doctor, which 2 or 3 years ago they said, it's getting to that level of accuracy. So embedding those models, and yes, don't get me wrong, these models are going to be big when you're downloading, a doctor plus a health coach plus a nutritionist plus psychologist is what I need the most. But all of those put onto your phone, then it's going to start getting bigger and bigger. We had this argument yesterday, and I'm going to quote Tariq for the rest of his life. So Tariq said, there is general intelligence, it's in a bunker. And I was like, that sounds like a conspiracy theory. And then he was like, oh no, general intelligence is definitely next year. And I'm like, it's not. And this is exactly what Elon said. Elon said general intelligence is going to be here next year. And you're like, okay. So general intelligence is supposed to outperform a human, but be able to do the exact same tasks as what you're trying to solve. And I get it, you can chain these things together if you're a great prompt engineer, and it feels and looks like it's doing general intelligence, but it's not, right? And this is why Zuckerberg and Elon have spent, have bought 78,000 T100 CUDA cards and increasing global warming for us at the moment, right? Is they're aiming to get to here, but I think it's a long way away. Obviously, I kind of said yesterday, which I'm going to get a t-shirt made that says don't use ChatGPT. And I was like, the easiest thing is the open source models are so good, right? So everyone here who's got the laptop open, LLM Studio, pull it down. You've got an M2, hopefully, there, and hopefully he's got an i5 on there or something. Pull it down, LLM Studio, completely free, and then you can access all the models that you could possibly want, completely free, and run them on your local machine. And you can play around with them as much as you want. You can connect in the RAG stuff if you want. I'm going to show some links later for things like the large vision models. they'll all run through that platform. And the best one which I would say, is the Pixrial, which is the Mistral of Experts vision model, which dropped last week, which is incredible. 12B, so you're able to, if you've got 10 gig on there of space, you should be able to run it. So, that's the hype curve of Gen AI for you in a second, and I seem to have extended my talk by like 20 minutes. This isn't my quote, but I was at Google DeepMind, and the guy who was there, it was his quote. AI is not going to replace you. It's a person who is using AI that's going to outperform you. Like, I dare not share how much I spend personally on tools, AI-augmented tools, that actually allow me to do what I do at work for everything, marketing, everything else. And we said this last night in the bar, Bloomberg, average salary, starting salary at 335K. Let's do it, right? Simon, do I need to send you my resignation, or what's the process, right? Anyway, so part of it is it makes sense, right? But I don't think it's as simple as that, right? And I'm from New Zealand originally, so I have to put some type of ring in every single one of my my presentations. It's literally like I have no other choice about it. But like I said, all of these stuff down at the bottom, this is going to change the face of the industry, right? If you're an automation tool, you don't need an automation tool, because the large vision models are creating the code, which, spoiler alert, is PyAuto test, at runtime. So it's looking at the screen going, what am I looking at? Oh, I'm looking at, I spotted yesterday the guys were doing it. I don't have a signal. The page is saying I've got no internet access. Well, I'll just connect to the Wi-Fi. Click to the Disney Wi-Fi. Oh, now I've got an accepting terms and conditions. It's not difficult for it to go, okay, solved out my connectivity problems. Now I'm going on the internet and doing what I'm expecting. Or the the Microsoft visualization of thought demo is play Taylor Swift. And it literally goes and looks on your desktop and is like, can't see Spotify. And then clicks on it and goes, oh, I can't see iTunes, okay. I'll go to YouTube. And then it's like, goes onto YouTube, starts playing the track, some ads start playing, it skips it, and then it's playing Taylor Swift. And as far as it's concerned, it's managed to do its task with whatever it needed to see on the screen, whether it was a desktop, or it was a web app, it doesn't matter, right? As long as it didn't try ringing Tay-Tay and asking her to play the track down the phone, I think we're okay, right? So, part of it, I'm going to skip through some of this because we've only got I say 15 minutes, but it's probably a little bit longer. So, the automation thing's always been the same, right? It's this idea of, automate the world. I'm going to get rid of that slide, just to upset for a second. But this is the interesting bit, right? And I've added this bit, which I never wanted to add, just in case you needed the slide deck. So we started with this view of requirements, and people were like, requirements is like, we don't have requirements. And I was like, well, you do have requirements, even if you just was on a Teams call, you pulled the transcript down, and then even if you've got Copilot Plus already for E365, it'll tell you what actions needed to be done, by who. Okay, fine, they're requirements. But what's really important is this knowledge, right? And we said it yesterday, the reason why ChatGPT doesn't tell you where it found the information is because Sam admitted last week that it was 74% copyrighted material. So he can't show it's simon.austin.ftp/Harry Potter series.zip because Simon would get in trouble for sharing, his EPUB files from, to his family, but they've mined it. So every other large language model, including the one you just downloaded onto your laptop, will tell you where the information came from. So if you plug into just the RAG without in the graph stuff, it will tell you that in SharePoint, in some out-of-date file, it says it's going to be 3 to 6 weeks. In Confluence, it says it's going to be 2 to 3 weeks. And it's like, well, what's right? Which one should be right? And part of it is it's trying to understand your complex ecosystem. You could feed it all your tests, all your bugs, everything, and say, well, what can you see? What's interesting? And this is where, again, we never wanted this little guy, but I'd recommend getting him the cushion version of him. I'm sure Trisha's going to go now and get loads of them and bring them back in 5 minutes. See, she's having to work. She could be replaced by a robot. She hasn't been yet. Part of it is you have to have this assistant, right? And this is what's going to happen. You're going to have an assistant talking to you about, your health, your medical stuff. You need the same kind of thing within the testing landscape. Credit to the open text people at the end, they created something called Aviator. And the difference with Aviator is it's looking at what you're looking at the screen. So if you're on the result, you're on the load runner analyzing page, then it says, oh, did you see there's a bit of an issue with like an outliner, which is on the graph? Do you want me to pull up the open telemetry information and the root cause analysis stuff? So it's understanding how it helps you at the time. Same as if you were on a page and you were like, oh, I need some data, I need a dummy Amex card. Oh, here you go, right? It's there to help you do what you need to do. I want to talk about that. So the example here, which I'm going to show you in this 1-minute video clip, is when we started, because we do a lot with secure government, and we got this, which is a declassified NATO document, which they said to us, they said, okay, we've got this PDF, and it's got 688 requirements in. And what we did, well, Carl did originally, was he just dropped that into a ChromaDB and hit RAG and said, oh, how many requirements are there? And it said, oh, 7,850. You're like, no. And this is where part of it is, of course it doesn't understand the document, it doesn't understand the SRS format, which is an IEEE standard, it doesn't understand what it's looking at, it's just giving you a response. Look at Trish, she's brought an actual Christmas bag, like Santa Claus, to give some things. She's now going to walk around giving people them. It's just like, oh, it's unbelievable.
Well, give them when we leave, so we can scan it and...
Oh, vendors. Anyway, so here's the video, right? And so, this is what I handed over to this guy last week, so I feel really bad because he's now written it. But we take this document, 700 pages or something, exported from IBM DAWs, and as you can see, it might be 700 pages, I don't know how many pages are on this. A couple of hundred pages, right? So what we do when we're pulling this document in, we're actually creating a knowledge graph. So we're creating a relationship between data entry, log on, log off procedures, and trying to understand the relationship of, in essence, each one of the requirements, and then building a model off of that document so that we know that IKM SRS 6 is talking about testing the Titan classification system across Microsoft, SharePoint, OneDrive, Word, Excel. So if I've got a Word document and I want to flag it as classified, I can just go classified. And now you can't send it out of the building, right? So very simple solution. And someone's talking there, he sounds like me. But anyway, so part of it is we upload this document, and what it's really doing is it's going through and understanding the... Jonathan's in a little box, I'm going to take him home, he sounds well cute. It's like, okay, so we're uploading it, but what also we're doing is we're taking things like ISO 29119, which everyone hates, which is the software testing definitions documents, which talks about different types of testing terminology, right? And so I know people are controversial, but we fed this in, we fed in the ISTQB, we fed in TMAP, we fed in the BSI standards documents, and then we linked them, so where boundary value analysis links to another term that we use, it could understand the terminology, but equally we had to define what's the model for doing branch conditional testing, right? For all those great people who've been doing the stuff this week, they know all about classification trees and they know how to use them. We wanted to be able to do it, that if one of these items needs to be able to understand how to test it, we could use these different methodologies. This is Copilot for 0365, and it has no clue what I'm talking about. I'm literally saying to it, can you see this requirement, which it's taken and understood, exists, but it's got no structure. It doesn't understand the relationship of the data. So even though Copilot uses something called Microsoft Graph underneath it, which is not a graphing application, just in case you want to guess, is actually a knowledge graph that it's starting to take all of your documents off, all your emails and everything else. It's starting to build its own corporate graphing platform, which is very sneaky, but also really cool, because then suddenly you've got all this knowledge that's cross-functional. It's now generated out these 722 sets of feature files, tests, automation scripts. So each one of those scripts has, in this side it's a Gherkin script. I know Dan North would be happy that or Elizabeth Hendricks would be happy that I'm generating some kind of Gherkin But it generates a gherkin script because gherkin is quite a nicely formalized structure. It does a JSON for all the test steps, but also because we, surprise, surprise, do testing tools, we've also created a sense talk script to actually run it. So out of that, what was 700 requirements, we've actually created the tests that actually can run against Word, Excel, Outlook in a browser. So it's understanding the contextual awareness of what we're trying to do, and then you can see a very simple sense talk, because we don't have any DOM mention in here, it's all just click sensitivity, drop down from sensitivity and change it to corporate or urgent or high or whatever it is. So this is just the demo app, which I say it's a demo app, I'm not actually going to tell you it's a secure desktop for a naval system or something like that, because I'd get into lots of trouble, right? But you've got this kind of capability so that it can actually drive whatever it sees, and this is the bit we're missing, which is what we're working on at the moment, is the large action model that actually then drives the screen, instead of what we're doing at the moment, which is still computer vision, which is fine, but we want to get to that next level. Sensitivity level. Found an error. It's probably the only bug I found in my entire career. Slightly worrying. But this was eggy as well. So yes, everyone's going to say to me, this is just Gradio. It is just Gradio, which is what Hugging Face and stuff use. But what I'm asking Eggy is saying, if you remember at the start, I said, what's the difference between a requirement, this requirement, and another requirement? And it'll tell me the difference, because it's going off, pulling this from the RAG and the graph-based RAG, and then also it's telling me where it found this information. So it wouldn't, if obviously ChatGPT, if I asked it what IR, IKM, SRS, unless it's found the NATO document, unless you literally, it's found that on the internet, it would not really understand that contextually. So anyway, so that was kind of, the idea was bring in domain context, bring in all your requirements, all your tests, and then bring it into something where it's going to understand the data and move it into knowledge, right? And I know we're nearly up in time, so I'm going to show you some last bits of tips at the end. But this is the whole point. You can only get to knowledge. You can't get to wisdom, right? Everyone here knows, well, if I try and do that, it doesn't work, right? This is why humans are still massively in the loop. You can only start putting the structure together. You need humans to interpret that information. If they don't interpret it, really, it can only get to here, which is knowledge. So knowledge graphs, I call this on the left-hand side, the kind of the more, the vector kind of information. So it's structured, kind of large amounts of information dumped in a folder. Okay, so normally, and I will be for the next 4 weeks or 6 weeks, I run a kind of a workshop, which is like a one-day workshop as well. And this is the last time I ran it at Sweden, I think. And so part of it is I wanted to kind of give you all the tips, which is when your camera can start getting use it quickly. So if you didn't go to Tariq's session, you didn't go to Jason's session, then you could just cheat and just use these blueprints, right? So the first one, this is me and Jason last year. I can tell I've got a checky one, but I'm using the same t-shirt, which means I only own one t-shirt, right? I love this, right? I'm not going to take credit for it, so well done, Jason. You've solved the entire world. He uses this format, right? So this is the markdown kind of approach, right? And so for every prompt he does, he gives it a mission, he gives it an input, and he expects it in an output format. Honestly, if you do nothing today, but you start using the Tariq's markdown method, you will save so much time because the accuracy just considerably improves, right? It's typing in a prompt that says, I'm a research scientist for MIT with 22 years experience and I would like a marketing document that has X amount of words. It's great, but there's so much information in there and a lack of structure that the accuracy over time, or consistency of the return is lower. The next one obviously is Jason. He joked about it yesterday and he was right about it. This is at the end of every prompt. Well, he says, the end of every prompt says, if you don't give me the right answer, I will lose my job. And I kind of get it. But this is actually a loophole. And I didn't realize this. This is a SAM loophole, which is if you say that you're going to give it $200, it's going to work harder than if you give it $199, $400, $5,000. It doesn't care. You tell it you're going to give it $200, it overworks. It's just It's Sam's, chat thing which you put into it, so there's some backdoor stuff that you can do. Again, Jason's favourite one, what prompt should I have asked? And then it gives you the prompt that it thinks you should have written, and then you then rerun that one, and then you compare the two responses and see what the best report is. Yes, okay, Jason, you're better than everyone else, you know it. I'm going to add Paul in there because I think Paul needs a bit of credit on here as well. Paul will always give the actual information into the prompt. So he'll say, okay, I've got all of this information, all of my transcript for my Teams call. Tell me what actions I need to do and what time they said it. And then you get the response that then gives you the links, which is, if you see Copilot does this, where it literally gives you the links to say, oh, it was 2 minutes and 22 seconds into the conversation, they said to Jonathan, you need to do this piece of work. This one's I say it's me, it feels like me. This is the large vision model, which I'd recommend. That's the link to it on the, I'd call it the right method because how can I be wrong, right? But this is the front end, so you can just go into, there's a couple of good ones now. The other trick, honestly, if you want to just finish my job and end all vendors, is there's something called LLaVA. It got released last week. It's Salesforce as large action model. It does everything. So literally, if you say to it, go into Salesforce or go into SAP or go into an app and do this, it will actually write the code and actually run it. It's annoying. It feels like it's going to end my career very quickly. You don't care about the European Union AI Act. Now this is the really hard stuff.
The QR code in the previous didn't work.
Didn't work, not work. Well, just type in VIP LLaVA and you'll get the page. It's a LLaVA model, but this will take you straight to the example Hugging Space samples page, so you can literally start uploading your own images and say to it, what's on the screen? So you can give it a screenshot of where you're testing at the moment. What test should I write for this screen? It'll tell you what accessibility test should I write for the screen. It's got all of that information in there. So highly recommend. I'll check out the QR code, and I'm sure it's my fault. Now, because we've got like 30 seconds left, this is the really hard stuff. This is the stuff that melts my mind. It's what was in an email this week to our CEO, is people keep on saying to me, well, what language? And so we've kind of gone a little bit further in the sense of we now run Markdown, Python, and SenseTalk in the same script. So being able to do a hybrid output where it doesn't matter if it's running JavaScript, Python, Perl, whatever you want it to run all of them in the samples together. It's quite cool. But the other reason why all this works, and I'm going to bring on the more complicated side. So this is visualization of thought. So you can see over here, it's going through and learning every single application, Paint apps, and as it's learning these interactions, it's bringing them into the XLAM. So that XLAM that I told you about, which is here, is a hybrid neuro-symbolic language, which is the way it can understand these applications. Now this is obviously just, if you really want to brain melt yourself, what would be running if I could press the button, is this is the Microsoft one, which you can see on the right-hand side, is in essence looking at the screen, and then doing YOLO to work out what it sees on the right-hand side, and then driving the application by saying, I don't know where I am, and then it's like closes the applications down, clicks on the start. Oh, I know I can see the start button. So this is the Microsoft visualization of thought, which is in play. And then finally, new for 2024 is this, which is my current thought process, which me and Jason haven't quite worked out on yet because our brains haven't melted enough, which is about prompt threading. Prompt threading being a technique where you allow it to run its own variant universe over here to just think itself. So it'll take somebody, I'm going to pick on Simon, and it'll say, Simon is an astrophysicist with all the same information, but loading in, astrophysics repos. What would an astrophysicist think about when he's looking at this application? And it might go nowhere, but the thread just runs, the variant runs until it finds something useful. And its hypothesis might be, I have no idea. There's no value in that person. But instead of having these linear chains, which people use at the moment, which is why we're all picking on one-shotting, this gives the ability for it to go off and think about other scenarios or other multiverses. I feel like I've just stolen old Disney's kind of reason not to be bothered to actually think about creating new episodes anymore. But anyway, I don't know what the answer is to this one. I'm trying to get Jason to tell me.